Hey, peace and power, Black folks. Hey, welcome to another Blueprint for Black Power study session. Dr. Amos N. Wilson's book, The Blueprint for Black Power, which was published in the 90s, is the basis of this study. My name is Dr. Ikemba Ajore, or Nduku. Nkemba Ajore, want to say Uhuru, Amani, not Nguvu, to all the people out there. Peace and Black Power. So, we giving folks some time to join the session, and those people who are going to be looking at this study session in the future, make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you like and share this podcast, so that we can get as many people to be a part of this study of Dr. Amos N. Wilson's work. The aims and objectives of doing the study session is to get us in the right frame of mind, the right mindset to be thinking about nation building, to be thinking about separating ourselves from the colonial state, from European political and economic domination. So there has to be a particular mindset. There has to be a particular a framework, theoretical framework that we are using to be able to liberate ourselves. And I do think about liberation. I do, have this conviction that Black folk, African folk, are colonized people. We do not fully control at all the life-sustaining institutions, the institutions that's needed for our survival when it comes to food, clothing, and shelter, land, property. There's this dependency on the colonizer, our historical enemy, the European. So Dr. Amos N. Wilson's text, The Blueprint for Black Power, he exposes this relationship between the white and Black community and what we need to do to be able to attain power in the 21st century. So again, my name is Ikemba Ojore. Usually when I do this study, just for people, maybe this is the first time they're joining us on this study, I usually go through the text paragraph by paragraph and discuss or interpret what Dr. Amos N. Wilson is telling us in the text. And so, I'm taking my time going through this text. I'm still in chapter 1, even though this is session number 17. I do plan on finishing this chapter, though. For everybody that's viewing, I'm finishing chapter 1 today. And so there's about 3 or 4 pages left. I'm going to read through all of that and just examine it as I'm going through it. So just giving y'all a heads up. Again, peace to everybody that's out there. Make sure you like and share. And appreciate you all joining us. Let me know if there's an issue with the volume too. I want to make sure everybody's able to hear me clearly. So for all those people who are reading along, I'm on page 20. I'm starting from page 20 at the top. That's where I left off at in chapter 1. I'm going to get to that in a second. But again, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We charge Colonialism. Another way to support our channel is to become a Patreon member. Peace. Always feel good to see you, sugar. Peace. Thanks for joining. And just in time, because I'm about to get into it. I actually was supposed to do this session yesterday, and the time just flew by so quickly. So anybody that was trying to tune in yesterday, man, that was an error on my part. I was actually recording something for my students, and the time just went past because my day started late. There was a few things that I had to take care of. My physical health and some things that were going on, so it kind of just like messed my day up, and I end up recording a session or recording a video for my students late, and before I knew it, the time had passed when I was supposed to do this session yesterday. So with that being said, though, I'm gonna get into it. We're gonna go through this. Some powerful stuff, man. Dr. Amos N. Wilson is always on point, and so hope y'all guys are as excited as I am to get through this study. So again, I'm on page 20 at the top. So Dr. Wilson, he says, our questioning of the legitimacy of white power, particularly white American power, does not amount to a call for the overthrow of the American government. However, it does amount to a call for African Americans to critically examine the origins and functions of the rules, morals, values, customary attitudes and behavior, common perspectives, and folkways they have been convinced to accept as the result of white American physical and coercive impositions, ideological propaganda, and conditioning procedures. Uncritical acceptance of Eurocentric rules, morals, customs, and so on by African Americans hides from them the fact that despite the norms and values they share with white Americans and which serve to legitimate the American social, political, economic system, white Americans possess a preponderant and dangerous power advantage over them. The power advantages of whites place them in positions to deny blacks political and economic freedom and survival at will, and it enables them to engage in an almost unimpeded genocidal attack against blacks whenever it may suit their power needs to do so. Right? This next statement by Dr. Amos N. Wilson is important because it sums up the point that he's making right now. He says the establishment, whatever rewards it gives us, will also, if necessary, to maintain its control, kill us. Simple fact. So it kind of goes back to the point I was making in regards to who controls the life-sustaining institutions for Black people. Like there's this dependency, and that's a problem. And I was having this conversation for hours today when we look at. I'm going to center it in America, but we can. This is a microcosm of the Black experience, of the African experience. So wherever you are, I think you can sort of transpose this idea, or this relationship, I should say, in America to what's happening in your respective areas. So whether you're in Kenya, Ghana, in the UK, France, Jamaica, Haiti, the same thing applies. I think the difference is that you may be in a country or a part of a state that's majority Black, right? But there's a global relationship, right? There's this international relationship that makes it just the same, whether you're hey, peace, whether you're in the United States or in any of these other places. So with that being said, getting back to his point, there's this relationship that Black people have in the States where the life-sustaining institutions is controlled by their historical oppressor and exploiter. And so because of this dependency, this idea that we're an American and white people are American, Black American and white Americans, there's two different worlds that we're living in. There's different sets of rules for these Americans. And the way that Black people view themselves as an American isn't the same way that white people view themselves as an American. And that's because we have two different histories. And the relationship that we have has been this relationship of colonizer and colonized. It's not just a slavery thing, because after slavery, there still was decades of oppression and exploitation done. There's this marginalization where Black people become second-class citizens, not able to participate in the electoral process or the in the American process at all. And so with that being said, there's two different lenses that we are viewing being America through. And so going back to what Dr. Amos N. Wilson is saying, though, in regards to the establishment and its rewards, the point he's making in this paragraph right here is that no matter how Black people view themselves as being American and being the same as white people, at the end of the day, there's an unequal relationship. And if white people can treat us a particular way today, but if worse come to worse and they have to choose survival or choose you over survival, they're choosing survival every time, right? Because there's a distinction. There's a historical distinction between the two groups of people. So again, the establishment, whatever rewards it gives us, will also, if necessary, maintain its control killers. And why are we being quote unquote rewarded within the system, right? That's to impede the process of revolution or nation building. And he's going to get to this. I don't want to jump too far ahead because there's some things that he's going to do to continue to corroborate the point that he's making here. So it's going to make more sense in a second. So Dr. Wilson, he says, therefore, the very vulnerability of African Americans to the arbitrary and injurious application of physical force and coercive power, legitimate and competent authority, and other forms of power now possessed by white America should in and of itself motivate them to, as rapidly and judiciously as possible, neutralize such power. This is necessary to Black political economic well-being, let alone Black biological survival. So again, this goes back to what I'm talking about in regards to the mindset that we need to have. We need to have this consciousness, this awareness. Today they say, I guess you woke today, but whatever. But we need to have this consciousness, this awareness, right, of the lack of power that we have. Now, there's this potential power that we have, which can become kinetic once we organize and understand what we have to do as Black people. And this is the point that he's getting at. In order to neutralize white power, we have to be conscious of how they're utilizing their power against us. How are they maintaining their position in the world? How are they able to control us? How are they able to legitimize their system by having us participate in it, getting us to, vote, send our children to their schools, despite them miseducating them, right? Get us to work for their corporate, get our degrees, right? And work for their corporations and aspire to be CEOs of these corporations that are going around the world exploiting people, that are exploiting people right in the nation in which you live. How do we neutralize that? That's how we have to be thinking, right? Can't be thinking like how can I survive? How can I, climb the social ladder within the American system or within this global system? No, how can we organize as African people among ourselves to undermine the system of oppression and exploitation, right? That's going to take, people being like-minded, studying Dr. Amos N. Wilson, right? And studying all of the other great leaders, from the Malcolm X's to the Nkrumahs to the Patrice Lumumbas, the Thomas Sakaras. We have to study all of these people and study revolutionary study revolution. Black nationalists study Black nationalists. This is what we have to do. So let me go on because he's going to make some powerful points. I'm telling you, bear with me. He says the failure of Black Americans to gain access to and fill significant numbers of positions of power and influence in America is not the result of a large number of Black individuals who lack initiative, drive, etc., but is ultimately the result of the nature of the power relations which inhere between white and Black Americans. White Americans, in hypocritically projecting the American political economic system and opportunity structure as egalitarian, that is, as colorblind and race neutral, justified their monopoly of positions of influence and power in terms of their superior individual characteristics, training, experience, and much else. In other words, according to dominant whites, there is nothing wrong with or racially discriminatory about the white-dominated social system, only something wrong with individuals. The largest percentage of those who happen to have something wrong with them just happen to be Black. Many Black Americans give consent to this line of reason. Notwithstanding, Betham's observation in this regard are well worth noting. So I hope you caught that, Dr. Amos Wilson. This is the problem that we are having now. This is how the system becomes legitimized because, okay, we see that there are Black people who are able to climb the social ladder, right? And may be able to occupy relative, positions of power. But that is used as a pretext to say, oh, the Black community, people from the Black community are not able to elevate themselves within the system because there's something fundamentally wrong with the individual, right? but there's masses of people. So now the individuals make up a group. So now they're able not to just say the individual, but it's something inherently wrong or fundamentally wrong with Black people. That's what they really want to say, at the end of the day. It's not an individual thing, because there's masses of Black people who aren't able to do it. And so they're able to, point to certain people under the system of colonialism and say, hey, look at this person. If they're able to do it, then what's wrong with you? True story. I mean, I had the experience. I was working at a sobriety outpatient institution. And so, people who are dealing with drug addiction, they don't stay. They come, they do some sessions, and they leave. And I was working with adolescents within this institution, and I was being trained by a psychiatrist and therapist, somebody who's been in the field for 30, 40 years. It was a white woman, right? And the discussion that she was having, the framework that they operate in, looks at the family structure and what's happening in the family structure. There's no indictment on the society. And I remember having a conversation with her, and the whole thing was what she was trying to train me to do is to get these individuals to be able to cope. And she cope with this system, to cope with society, right? To be able to get through despite everything that's going on, despite what the system is throwing at them. Because her thing is that if there were people in the same community that are able to do it, then this individual should be able to do it too. Yo, true story. And so this is what therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists are doing. This is what they're trained to do, like get the individual to adjust to the system of oppression and exploitation, adjust to colonialism, not to attack the system, overthrow the system that is causing them misery. I'm gonna, let me read this passage, and I'm gonna show you an example of what I'm talking about when we're dealing with people who are viewing the Black experience through the white lens. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna read this. So the quote says, however, it is a notable feature of power relations that they are themselves capable of generating the evidence needed for their own legitimation. Thus, the evidence of superiority and inferiority, which justifies the inequality of condition between dominant and subordinate, is itself largely the product of that condition. Those who are excluded from key positions, activities, or resources are thereby denied the opportunity to acquire or demonstrate the capacities and characteristics appropriate to their occupation, or exercise so justifying their subordinate position. This is a great point that he's making too. So this is true even where relatively open processes of selection are at work. Once the selection is performed by an education system which is given the task of preparing children differentially for their respective future roles, evidence about the fitness or appropriateness of people to exercise power thus tends to be structured by the relations of power themselves, and therefore to have a self-fulfilling quality about it. If we look finally at consent, then we find that it is precisely the lack of some key resource or skill deriving from the rules of power themselves that leads the subordinate to voluntary acceptance of their dependency upon the powerful, to their conformity to established rules, and to giving their consent to the particular power relation. This is a powerful point that's being made. I'm not going. I kind of want to read it again, but I'm not. But there's a point that's being made in regards to how Black people are being locked out of certain key positions. Historically, have been locked out of certain key positions, developing certain skills. And so because they're being locked out, other people, the colonizer has been able to monopolize those positions, those key positions, those skills, and so forth. And so with that being said, now this goes back to earlier section when we were talking about competent authority. So now because they've been locked out, now Black people are looking to those people as authority figures. And so now we legitimize the system by going to these so quote unquote authority figures, not even uh, uh, understanding, or I don't want to say maybe there is an understanding, but just we're in survival mode, but not addressing the issue of the reason that they are in a position of competent authority is because of the rules lock Black people out of being able to have access to legitimate, I'm sorry, competent authority. And so with that being said, if with that mindset and with that understanding, and you comprehend that, then there should be a move to separate ourselves from the people who put themselves in that position. Because now what's going to happen is there's going to be a relationship between the person who doesn't have the skills or been locked out of that position with the people who are in that position, where there's this dependency, right? And so it kind of perpetuates the relationship of dependency on the very people who put us in the position that we're in now. And the only way that I think that we can break that is if we have the mindset of nation building. If we begin to say, hey, we have to build a nation of our own, separate ourselves from the historical oppressor and exploiter. It's because, just to be clear, if we continue the relationship, how long will it take for us to catch up? There's a reason we've been locked out. And Dr. Wilson is going to get to the point. He mentioned it earlier when he said, even if the system is colorblind, he's going to emphasize that and again in a minute. But he says that white Americans, going back to page 20, white Americans, and hypocritically projecting the American political economic system and opportunity structure as egalitarian. Yeah, you can project it as egalitarian now. That is, as colorblind and race neutral, justify their monopoly of positions of influence and power in terms of their superior individual characteristics. No, they're in a position that they're in because we weren't allowed to compete on an equal playing field. Slavery, obviously, but even after slavery, when the country after the Civil War was supposed to grant Black people all of these rights here, that never happened. And even if we go around the world, because right now, centered in the U.S., but the same thing you can say happens in the West Indies, in South America, on the continent of Africa, where there's this relationship that they have with the colonizer in Africa. I'll use the Congo as an example. When the Belgium left Congo, the reason why they didn't look at it as a big deal to grant independence to Congo, despite having control over a vast amount of territory in Africa, this little country in Europe, where they were able to exploit and gain all of this wealth. The reason why it was not a big deal to them to hand over the keys to of the government to the Congolese is because they felt that they controlled the economic institutions at the time, the military. They had people in key positions of power. So even if the president and the prime minister is Congolese and they've been voted in and they control the basis of power, was still under the control of the Belgium. So, the system could look just, egalitarian, colorblind. It doesn't matter when the people control the resources. They control the resources. They can say, I like you all day and treat you well, treat you good, but you're still dependent on those people. So let me show you, just to give you a point. I'm sorry, just to make this point even stronger. I'm going to share my screen. Check this out. This is Kwame Ture being interviewed by Mike Wallace. Share this. Now, this is typical. I'm going to tell you, this is typical white supremacist thinking. Hope y'all can hear this clearly.
Created by white society. It's purposely created by white society, and then they throw it back on us and blame us. That's the first thing we have to create in Black people. Then secondly, we have to move to a position where we can control the housing in our neighborhoods so that we're not exploited, so that we're not charged high rents to share apartments with rats, and so that the owners of those apartments don't live in the suburbs grabbing the profits from us, that we are able to grab it, and that the money will be able to stay in our community so we can develop it. It is no different from a colony in Africa who is supposedly free, but her resources are controlled by the mother country. They have to move to a position to control the resources, and having done that, their problems are already solved.
And the means that you will use to achieve all of this? What?
Any means necessary.
Well, I know, but now, spell that out. What does that mean?
It means that we will develop tactics as we go along, and whatever those tactics are, we will use them.
Tactics? That means you've got to buy the buildings. You've got to start the businesses. You've got to train the people. How are you going to do that by yourselves? How are you going to do it without the help of the white community?
Well, the first help we need of the white community is just to turn over those buildings to us.
Turn them over?
That's correct. Turn them over.
You think that's likely, Mr. Carmichael?
Well, you asked me what help we wanted white people to give.
Yes.
Or they could buy it for us.
You mean Washington would buy it from, let's say, the slumlord and turn it over to you?
That's correct.
You believe really that that is the salvation of the black man?
I think that this country is run by property ownership, and that black people are not only propertyless, they are viewed as property. And we have to move to a position of property ownership in this country so that we can bargain from a position of strength with racists rather than a position of weakness.
You're one black man who went to a good, essentially white high school in the city of New York.
That's
you
correct.
obviously had had a good education.
That's
A good many of the people who work with you here in SNCC can say the same thing.
And we're saying that,
And you're a black man who came from a New York ghetto.
and we're saying that there's a system that allows for one or two black people to get out, and that's the rationale for keeping other black people down.
And it has nothing to do with the unwillingness or inability of the Negro to help himself and to work hard.
That's the rationale, that the reason why black people aren't this is because they're lazy, unambitious, stupid, have rhythm, and they eat watermelon.
You call on the black.
Shut it down right there. I mean, again, there's so many things to take away from that, but just that point right there, the rationale is white people think that black people don't want to be free, that we don't have, the same values that they have in regards to wanting food, clothing, and shelter, right? That we don't have the initiative, that we're just in poverty because we choose to be in poverty, right? There's never this indictment on the system by the colonizer, by those who benefit from the system. So, I think it was a great point. I'm glad that Kwame Ture was able to reverse that on them, right? And get him to see, like, this is what you're saying. This, what you just said is code for the reason why we're in the position that we're in is because we're lazy. We eat watermelon. All of these stereotypes, right? All of these things to rationalize the oppression and exploitation of African people. Now, let me get through this. I stopped a lot. I'm going to read some more of this. I'm on page 21 at the bottom for anybody that's reading along. The last paragraph on page 29. Dr. Wilson, he says the condition consent to ideological acceptance. And peace to everybody. I know there's some new people that's been joining. Peace to everybody in the chat. Uhuru. Yeah, Uhuru means Kiswahili. It means freedom to all my folks out there. So at the bottom, he says the condition consent to ideological acceptance and behavioral conformity of Black Americans to white American political and economic domination as legitimate are designed to blind them to the fact that they can only gain access to and occupy a very significant number of positions of influence and power by creating, developing, and applying ideological action, perspectives which go beyond and stand outside the existing relations of power. They're supporting social customs, traditions, and arrangements. If Blacks are to empower themselves, they must question white originated and self-serving rules and ideological justifications for establishing and maintaining white domination as a legitimate expression of power consented to by blacks themselves, right? We have to question. The school don't want us to question. The school you send your children to, they're not going to teach the children to question the system, right? Those education systems are there to socialize our children so that they can be great citizens, to be good citizens, products. They want to make products for the American system. That's what the schools are for. They're there to create a product for America, a good product. And a bad product is someone who's going to challenge the system. That's a bad product. And this is what independent schools is, us creating our own independent school system is for. This is the point of creating those African-centered schools to teach our children that no, like you're not going to be a product for the system of oppression, exploitation, for the colony, for the settler colonial state. You're not going to be a product. You're going to learn how to build a nation of your own. You're going to learn how to organize the community to be self-sufficient, right? Or interdependent with other Black communities, right? This is what we're going to do. We're going to break our ties to, or sever our ties to the colonial system. This is what we should be teaching. Well, I was just having another conversation about, I'm talking about this stuff all day, but in regards to the schools, right? There's certain things that is okay to teach in the schools, and there's certain things that they don't want taught or they're not teaching in the schools, right? And so there's always a political agenda when it comes to what should be taught in the schools. And I want to know, and this isn't a slight against any community, but I want y'all to just like really think about this. Like there's, in regards to even sexuality in the school, right? There's this push to teach sexuality in certain groups of people and family structures and things like that within the school system, right? But what about the issues? Because this is people who are being discriminated against. People that are being discriminated against feel as though that there needs to be education in the school system to keep themselves or to protect themselves or to defend themselves against bigotry and prejudice, right? So understand that. In the Black community, what about all of the other issues? What about drug abuse? Why the schools aren't talking or educating children about drug abuse and drugs in the community, gun violence in the community, broken families in the community, all of the thing, poverty. Why is there's no these are critical issues as well, very critical issues, but the school doesn't touch on that though. Why isn't that important? And I will admit that there is not people in our community that's lobbying for these things to be taught in the schools too. So that's another thing. So we have to get organized because other groups are getting organized and having things spoke about and being taught in the school. So, it's a real thought, man. But let me go on because I keep on stopping. I'm going to get through this chapter. I said I'm going to finish this chapter. These rules and ideological justifications must be directly challenged or subverted by Blacks in order to enhance and exercise of Black power counter to white power. Even if the American political economic system is now colorblind. Remember, he talked about this before. This is what I was talking about. He's going to emphasize this, right? He said, even if the American political economic system is now colorblind or race neutral, which most assuredly it is not. So even if it was, but Dr. Wilson is saying, but it isn't though. But if I'm going to concede that it is, this counterfactual situation occurred after almost 3.5 centuries of white racial prejudice towards oppression of Blacks. If I've been oppressing you for 300 to 400 years, right? If I've been oppressing you for 300 to 400 years and I decide to stop oppressing you and saying, hey, we can move forward as equals now. But I control all of the institutions. I already written the rules of the game so that I can put myself in the position of power relative to you, where now there's this dependency where you are powerless in the system. And when I say powerless, it's not that, the power is in the people. It's all about, the knowledge. It's about us organizing So despite all of the power, the only reason they have the power is because we have been miseducated, indoctrinated into being a part of the system that they have developed and created to benefit them, right? And that's the only reason, because nothing they did, if you think about it, it was the power of our labor that built this country. You know, they wouldn't have been able to build this country without African labor, without indigenous land. So it is the people at the end of the day. It's this fake power they have. This power that they have has everything to do with their ability to manipulate. The next section is manipulation is power. The reason they have power is because of everything that Dr. Wilson is talking about in this book in regards to competent authority. Influence is power, coercion is power, force is power. This is the reason right here. So let me get to this. I'm going to get to the summary. I'm going to finish this and get to this summary. He says, it was during this long period that whites developed and accumulated the collective, cultural, social, political, familial, and individual capital that their domination of blacks afforded. These accumulated advantages are used by whites, even in a race-neutral, egalitarian society, to provide themselves with further huge advantages compared to blacks who have suffered 3.5 centuries of accumulated disadvantages. A contemporary race-neutral society, in terms of its neutrality alone, would in no way resolve the problem of gross inequalities between whites and blacks. In fact, such a society will function only to maintain, if not in actuality, enhance them. Blacks must develop means of overcoming white social, political, socio-economic advantages, regardless of the racial status quo. Right. So I'm just going to pull up a stat in regards to wealth distribution, just to give you an example, man, of the situation that we are in as black folks. So this is a stat on the distribution of wealth in this country. Let me share my screen. Bam, bam, bam. So at the make sure this comes up. Am I sharing? Okay, great. And hopefully you're able to see this. I don't know, maybe too small. But if you look at the distribution of wealth, this might be too small for you guys, but hopefully you can see it. But I'll read it out anyway. So if you go here, it shows you from 1990 to 2020 how the distribution of wealth was distributed in this country. And so if I go here to 1990, what comes up, well, it's 1989. Look at the third quarter. Whites controlled 90.4% of the wealth in this country. Blacks control 4% of the wealth in this country. Hispanics 2.1, and other. When you think of other, that could be, they don't specify here, but I'm going to assume that it could be the collective of Koreans, Indians, even people who may identify themselves of mixed racial heritage. So, you know, those others, people who don't identify as white, black, and Hispanic, right? So they collectively control 3.5%. So as you move 1990, you see that is 89.8%, blacks 4.1%. I'm going to go to 2000. You can go, this chart is going to change. It's going to fluctuate, right, a little bit. But if you go to 2000, you see whites control 91.6%. Blacks control 3.3%. That's a drop, right, from 1990. Hispanics 2.1, others 3.1. Now, like this goes back to slavery when we talk about this distribution of wealth and white people. The point that Dr. Amos N. Wilson is making: white people able to monopolize certain industries, land ownership, being able to monopolize land in this country, and so them being able to do that for 3.5 years. And then the next chapter, in chapter 2, when Dr. Wilson talks about bases of power, there's going to be a graph or a chart that we're going to go through to show how they were able to systematically do this, right? But this is the aftermath of all of this. So once they're in that position, we're talking about wealth, and in order for Black people to be able to equalize or neutralize white control or power or wealth, they would have to, at the end of the day, like they would either have to be able to purchase this property, land. They would have to go to whites. There will be this dependency on white people, or they would have to like really be like a revolution, or there would have to be the separation where we would have to actually like leave, because the control of the land, they would have to give up that land. You know what I'm saying? There's other ways that, or we have to create new wealth, and there's ways to do that as well. But you can see that like this relationship that we have, as long as we're locked into this relationship, we're not going to be able to gain the wealth to say that this country is equal, gain enough wealth to say this country is equal. Let's see, from 2000, let's see how things changed. From 2000 to 2010, whites 87.5%, blacks 4.1%. I want you to notice the other. The other is 6.1% now. Go back to 1990. The other was 3.5%. Blacks were 4%, right? 2010, 6.1%. I'm just going to fast forward to right now in 2020. Whites 83.6%. Other 9.4%. They have doubled the wealth of Black people in this country. Something to think about. Black people 4.3%, Hispanic 2.6%, right? This wealth distribution is going to remain there in the next 30, 40 years. How much you think that's going to change? If anything, Black wealth may be under 4%, under 3% if we're going in if we continue in the same direction that we are right now, going down the same path that we're going right now. So let me stop sharing that. Where am I? Manipulation is power. I know I said I was going to finish this chapter, but I don't think I'll be able to finish this. Let me see. I'm going to do manipulation is power. I'm just going to go straight through it. All right, y'all. So bear with me. And then the summary, I'm going to do the summary next time I do this session, because I do have an early morning. So manipulation as power. Manipulation as power. Appreciate everybody too for joining. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like and share. So this is the last of the typologies. In the beginning, Dr. Wilson said he's going to go through these typologies of power. It's not so much about the definition. It's more so about the different forms of power that are used against the Black community. So manipulation as power. He says manipulation involves the attempt by the manipulator to elicit certain desired responses from his subject while concealing his efforts to do so. In this way, the manipulator seeks to constrain, restrict, or prevent certain undesirable actions on the part of his subject to subtly direct his subject to behave in certain desired ways outside his subject's knowledge and awareness. Manipulation involves a more efficient exercise of power than force, coercion, and influence, because it is less likely to evoke resistance, since the subject is unaware of the effort to influence him, or may think that the manipulator is exercising his influence to achieve an end desired by both the manipulator and the subject himself, when in actuality, the subject is being influenced toward an end which may be detrimental to himself and beneficial only to his manipulator. All right. So remember that when you go to the voting booth, man, to vote for one of these Democrats, man. You know, John F. Kennedy was one of the master manipulators, man. We had a bunch of manipulators. I hope we ain't got no Obama heads on here, because Obama was a master manipulator. All of these presidents. So just keep that in mind when you go to that voting booth, and these people were telling you what they're going to do for you. How long they've been telling these politicians been telling us they're going to look out for us, right? They'd be knocking on your door. I remember this one politician came to me. It was election day, and the politician, she came to me and she said, yeah, it's election time. You're going to vote. And I told her, I was like, I'm registered in New York. She ain't had no rap. She looked like she was about to have a whole conversation with me. She was excited. When I told her I wasn't registered in Philly, she just like, hey, didn't have no rap for me at all. Like, dang. We still people though. We still have a conversation. You don't know who I know. I may go down the street and talk to some people and tell them to vote for you, right? But they don't care. And I haven't seen her since she's been elected, man. I haven't seen her in the communities. And this was like 4 years ago, probably. So he says, thus, conciliations of his. Did I read this part? Oh, yeah. Thus, the manipulated subject may be led to perceive his own responses and behavior as expressions of his own free will and choice. Commonly, manipulation is achieved by skillfully presenting information, rewards, and deprivations in ways which shape the consciousness and behavior of the subject and motivates him to freely choose to act in ways compatible with the concealed intentions of his manipulator. I would argue we've been manipulated into thinking that we are, we have the same interests. I'm just going to be frank. We've been manipulated to think that we are Americans, man. I'm going to keep it like that. Malcolm X said it best, man. You're not an American. As a matter of fact, let me pull this up. Man, while I'm here. Malcolm X. What did he say? I'm going to pull up the words, though. Because he told us, and y'all may be familiar with it. What did he tell us about dining? He was talking to us about being a diner. I hope it goes right here. And just in case you don't have it, make sure I'll put this in our Google Drive. It's Malcolm X's collection of speeches. You have probably mostly all Malcolm's public speeches and interviews. If not, not all of them, but it's a huge collection. It's about 900 pages of Malcolm's speeches. I'll put it in our Google Drive. It should be in our description for anybody who's interested. I'll make that accessible for you. All right, I wasn't prepared for this, so I'll just go to the video. What did Malcolm say about being a citizen? Oh man, he said a lot of things. I'm trying to think of which one. Let's go here. I'm gonna share my screen. We might as well go in. Right now. Why not? While we here.
Or illiterate, whether you live on the boulevard or in the alley, you're going to catch hell just like I am. We're all in the same boat. And we all are going to catch the same hell from the same man. He just happens to be a white man. All of us have suffered here in this country political oppression at the hands of the white man, economic exploitation at the hands of the white man, and social degradation at the hands of the white man. Now, in speaking like this doesn't mean that we're anti-white, but it does mean we're anti-exploitation. We're anti-degradation. We're anti-oppression. And if the white man doesn't want us to be anti-him, let him stop oppressing and exploiting and degrading.
Hey, let me stop it there. I'm gonna let me pull this up. while we're at it, why not? I'll put this in the I'll put this again in the Google Drive. But this is from the collection of speeches. So this is the last message too. One of the for me, one of my favorite speeches by Malcolm X is the last message. For some reason, I think because it's not actually his last speech, but on February the 14th, after his house was firebombed, he gives this delivery or this speech in Detroit. This is on February 14th, and it's called The Last Message on, if you look for it on YouTube. But it's something in this, something about this speech that makes me think that, if we really want to understand like Malcolm and, what he was really trying to educate and tell us, it could all be found in the message in this speech. But of course, you want to take Malcolm as a collective and listen and read everything that you can on him. But here we go, right here. I think it's right here. So I'm going to read this. This is what he says about being an American. One of the things that made the Black Muslim movement grow was its emphasis upon things African. This was the secret to the growth of the Black Muslim movement. African blood, African origin, African culture, African ties. And you'd be surprised, we discovered that deep within the subconscious of the Black man in this country, he is still more African than he is American. He thinks that he's more American than African because the man is jiving him. The man is brainwashing him every day. He's telling him, you're an American, you're an American. Man, how could you think you're an American and you haven't ever had any kind of American treat over here? You have never. 10 men can be sitting at a table eating, dining, and I can come and sit down where they're dining. They're dining. I've got a plate in front of me, but nothing is on it. Because all of us are sitting at the same table. Are all of us diners? I'm not a diner until you let me dine. Then I become a diner. Just being at the table with others who are dining doesn't make me a diner. And this is what you've got to get in your head here in this country. Just because you're in this country doesn't make you an American. No, you've got to go farther than that before you can become an American. You've got to enjoy the fruits of Americanism. You haven't enjoyed those fruits. You've enjoyed the thorns. You've enjoyed the thistles, but you have not enjoyed the fruits. No, sir. You have fought harder for the fruits than the white man has. You have worked harder for the fruits than the white man has, but you've enjoyed less. When the man put the uniform on put the uniform on you and sent you abroad, you fought harder than they did. Yeah, I know you. When you're fighting for them, you can fight. So when you're fighting for them, you can fight. You're fighting for us. Come on, y'all. Let's go. Let's go, man. Let's go. All right, so let me read this last part, but I think like that's a powerful point too that Malcolm is making, because I mean, just being here, like, what does it mean to be American? Like, you can't just say, hey, I'm an American because there's a law that says that you're a citizen and so forth, man. When I look at that citizenship, you're just saying I'm a subject to the government and their laws and their rules, and I have to abide by these laws and rules, right? Because that's all it is. There's nothing innate about it. There's nothing natural about it. There's nothing inherent about it, right? There's just certain rules that we abide by, and we legitimize it. When we legitimize it, we say, hey, yeah, that means I'm an American. Okay, I'm an American. That's all that is. It's an agreement upon. It's something that we agree upon as a group, right? And so, there's a lot. So let me get to this point. All right. So he says, I'm at the bottom of page 22. Wrong notes two important general forms where manipulation may occur. First, the power holder may exercise concealed control over the power subject through symbolic communication designed to make veiled suggestions, to limit or determine selectively the power subject's information supply, or to inculcate, without appearing to do so, certain positive or negative attitudes. but an equally widespread kind of manipulation occurs where A alter B's environment in such a way as to evoke a desired response from B without interacting directly with B at all. Oh my God, man. This is scary. Did y'all catch that? What he's saying? That's a fact. This is look at the behavioralists. I want y'all to look at the history of behavioralism in America. Look at some of the fathers of behavioralism. These people who are trying to like manipulate human behavior to get them to act in a particular way. So to elicit a response, they create an environment, a particular environment to elicit that response, right? So this has to there has to be experiments done, whether it's in a controlled environment or uncontrolled. But of course, they try to create a controlled environment, and that's another thing. Like, who's to say that we're not living in controlled environments? Well, we are living in controlled environments, man. It's a matter of perspective, if you think about it. But so there's levels to it. Let me put it like that, because there's controlled environments, but there's also a controlled environment where they're trying to see what a particular result is going to be if things are a certain way. But the reason I say that we are in controlled environments is because of situations where they allow things to happen just to see what the result is going to be, what the outcome is going to be. Hey, don't send the police in there, or send the police in there. Let's see what happens. Turn the water off. Let's see. Don't give them any hot water. Don't give them any cold water. What would happen if we, up the prices, up the price on bread, up the price on milk, like what would take place? I mean, there's all types of things that can happen, right? In order to see, and then they'll do it in particular states. What if we do this in Florida? What's going to happen in Florida? Let's see what happens in Florida. And if it works in Florida, let's do it in Georgia. If it works in Georgia, let's do it here, right? Like these things happen all the time. But back to like the behavioralist though, if you look at some of the writings of B.F. Skinner, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, it's one of those books, scary book, man. If you look at Eddie Bernays, who writes Propaganda, right? I think it's another guy, Leo Strauss, if I can recall. But these guys are writing about how to manipulate the public. Like they look at the public like herd. They look at masses of people like a herd that should be controlled. And if you don't control them, the herd just gonna go crazy and wild. Like it's this fear of the masses of people just running wild and just like causing chaos in society. And so with that being said, it's like, hey, we have to control their behavior. And so they create environments to elicit certain responses. So just going back to what Dr. Amos N. Wilson says, in this quote at the top, he says, but an equally widespread kind of manipulation occurs where A being the white community, alters B's environment, the black community, in such a way as to evoke a desired response from B without interacting directly with B at all. Without interacting directly with B at all. Deep. So let me finish. I'm going to finish the section right here. It said, Wrong further notes that manipulation may involve the most dehumanized, and as far as we are concerned, perhaps the most dehumanizing exercise of power of all, because unlike the exercise of obstructive physical force, visible, coercive, and authoritarian power, where the intent of his adversaries and the sources of assault and frustration are known to the subject, manipulation is a form of power that cannot be openly resisted by the power subject, since he is unaware of the power holder's intent, or even sometimes of his existence. There is no visible command for him to disobey, no identifiable adversary against whom to assert his freedom. The manipulation of African American political and economic attitudes by the white ruling elite is designed to effectively secure, enhance, and exercise power while not appearing to do so. While appearing to provide blacks with power or options equal to that or those of whites. Let's read that again. While appearing to provide blacks with power or options equal to that or those of whites? Are the options the same? Are they equal? The point of this type of manipulation is to win the acceptance of blacks of the legitimacy of white power, its moral integrity, its legitimating ideology, and the acceptance by blacks of their obligation to obey the directive of white power while believing their obedience to be expressive of their own free and moral will. Only by basing their behavioral orientation on their own African history, only by basing their behavioral orientation on their own African history, culture, values, interests, consciousness, and identity can blacks prevent their behavioral manipulation by self-serving whites and act under the influence of their own self-generated enhanced power, right? What if one day we just all wake up and say, hey, we are not the same as you. You know, we no longer want to build this structure, this institution called the United States of America anymore. You know, we no longer agree or align with the colonial state, the imperialist state, right? When we start looking, and I call it an imperialist state because sometimes we don't even look at what America does outside of the United States of America. Yo, peace to the chat, man. I want to appreciate everybody. It's 10 o'clock. I tried to finish the chapter, man. I can't help myself. I'm sorry. But I'm at the summary. I'm going to finish the summary up, and we're going to go into chapter 2. And, you know, just for the, I want to also just say again, I'm just repeating what I've said before. But for those people who are viewing, I go through these chapters like this because I'm definitely thinking about the future. You know, I'm just thinking about people who are going to read this book or who haven't read the book. And I think some of these sections, it can get a little, dense, and just the language that, or the words that, or concepts, I should say, the concepts that Dr. Amos N. Wilson says, I think like really needs to be examined further. And so, I don't want to just like give you a summary of the chapter and do like 4 or 5 of these. And what else am I doing? I want to contribute to the movement. And I think, if we can be a walking book, and that's part of it. Like if we can walk this and talk this book right here, like this whole book, I think we will be in a better position and condition than we are right now. All right. So that's what that's all about. I want to appreciate you all for joining. Don't know, this weekend I'm going to be at a conference, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to record on Sunday. An African Center conference. I'm excited about the conference. I can't publicize it either. So if you know. I'm sorry, but appreciate you all. And if you're interested in it, though, I just can't publicly talk about it. So if anybody is interested, hit me up. I'll put my email in the chat. We can do it like that. All right. So again, appreciate you all. I'm gonna sign off about 5, 4, 3, and a hooroo to all the comrades that joined, the Mani Nanguvu. Appreciate you all. Peace.